Actually, ito hindi naman 'to nakakagulat 'no, yung mga sumuporta kay Sara Duterte at saka kay Bongbong Marcos during the previous, election, huwag kayong magulat kasi talagang napag-usapan na 'to, especially coming from Vice President Sara Duterte. Talagang gusto na ibalik yung mandatory ROTC, okay? Tapos kamakailan sinabi ni Senator Sherwin Gatchalian, masyado raw mahilig mag-TikTok, masyado na mahilig sa cellphone, medyo siguro dapat mas tutukan daw yung disiplina sa mga kabataan natin. Kaya ang proposal niya, ibalik yung mandatory ROTC. Pag-uusapan natin yan ngayong gabi. Kasama natin si Professor Jail Cornelio. Siya pong Associate Dean for Research and Creative Work ng Ateneo de Manila University. Good evening, Professor Jail. Thank you for joining us. Isa pong malaking karangalan, sir.
Wow, thanks very much, Christian. And hello, everyone.
Formal-formalan muna tayo. Pero kasi bigatin si Professor Jail, no? Ang expertise niya, ang focus ng studies niya, ng area of study niya, Christianity at saka youth, no? So, dito sa pagkakataon na pag-uusapan natin, kabataan, okay? Sige, tumbukin na natin. Ano ba? What did you think of that? Yung sinasabi nga ni Senator Sherwin na medyo kulang sa disiplina yung mga kabataan, masyadong focus sa TikTok, social media, sa cellphones nila. That's why this is one of the justifications for the proposal to mandate ROTC training. What do you think of this?
Nako, kami mga sociologists, ang tawag namin dito ay moral panic, Christian. No, yung moral panic, tumutukoy siya doon sa feeling na merong threat sa lipunan natin. Pero yung basis ng threat na yon, most of the time ay imaginary lang. Walang basis. I think that's exactly what we have here in this situation right now. Ang assumption is that young people are undisciplined. Tapos kapag tinanong natin ano ang basis po niyan, Senator, ang sasabihin niya, at which he did, was TikTok, games, di na sila sumusunod sa mga magulang nila. We can go on and makikita natin yung mga comments ng mga tao on Facebook agreeing with him. Pero may basis ba talaga yon in reality? Yun ba talaga yung problema na pinagdadaanan ng maraming kabataan ngayon? Most likely, we will arrive at one conclusion. That's not true. Moral panic lang yan. Nagpapanik tayo as if the threat is real, but it's only imaginary.
So more of anecdotal yung sinasabi niya. Pero pwedeng sabihin ng iba kasi, valid pa rin naman yun kasi that's his observation. And many Filipinos actually espouse that kind of belief na talaga medyo kulang sa disiplina. Ang gusto kong tanongin, yung perspective niyo naman assailing that. Ano naman yung basis nun?
Good. Well, primarily because we don't even know what the word undisciplined means. Doon tayo nagagaling right? So, kung merong basis kung sinasabi ng senator at na maraming mga Pilipino na hindi na disiplinado yung mga tao or mga kabataan ngayon, can we actually go beyond the usual suspects? Nagti-TikTok parate, nagko-computer parate, hindi na sumusunod sa mga magulang. But bear in mind, Christian, and bear in mind, ladies and gentlemen, ang mga kasama natin ngayon dito sa Facts First, this is always the problem every time there's a new generation that is emerging. Ang tawag namin mga sociologists of generation dito ay intergenerational conflict. Bakit? Or intergenerational conflict. Yung mga matatanda, yung mga bata, hindi sila nagkakasundo. Ang laging sinasabi natin doon, generational gap. But when we analyze more closely kung ano yung mga sources ng generational gap na yun or conflict na yun, makikita natin that we have competing values or competing virtues. Pero kung tutusin, if our adults would be honest, balikan nila yung kabataan nila. Ano yung sinasabi ng mga magulang nila about them when they were young? Most likely may moral panic din yung mga magulang nila or mga grandparents nila about them. It's the same situation that we have right now. It has no basis.
It's common. Kumbaga talagang nararanasan yan. Siguro ang pinaka dito common na manifestation niya, 'di ba, nadidinig natin. Nung panahon namin hindi kami ganyan eh.
Exactly.
Yan, 'di ba? Tama ba?
Exactly. So, kung ganito kami noon, kung ganito kami pinalaki ng mga magulang namin noon, dapat ganito rin kayo lumaki ngayon. Kung nag-ROTC kami noon, dapat mag-ROTC din kayo ngayon. Huwag kayong duwag, huwag kayong takot. Pero that assumes that all generations are the same over time and across history. But that's not true eh. It's a very different situation right now. Discipline can be implemented, administered in different ways. School, family, the institutions of our society, yun ang i-strengthen natin. Hindi militarized ang approach parate.
Dito naman, why would people actually make use of moral panic to justify the the reinstatement of mandatory ROTC. Kung napansin niyo po ng mga nanonood, no, I'm careful with my words kasi meron naman talagang ROTC ngayon technically, no?
Yes.
But it's one of the options available to you pag kinuha niyo po yung NSTP. Yan. Yun nga, why would people, the officials, policymakers, make use of that so-called moral panic to justify this? Bakit kailangan pa ng ganun?
Precisely because it has no basis. Mas madali, di ba? Gagamit ka ng moral panic, gagamit ka ng threat, right, to securitize your society. You inflict fear eh. In that sense, hindi siya reasonable. Hindi siya reasonable na katulad ng, bakit natin kailangan ng mas magandang science or mas magandang mathematics education sa bansa natin? Bakit? Kasi mahina tayo sa PISA. Mahina ang reading natin. Bakit natin kailangan paigtingin ang ating mga reading at reading classes, no, sa elementary, sa primary school? Kasi bagsak tayo sa learning poverty by age 10. Hindi pa rin kayang magbasa ng mga bata. Bakit natin kailangan yung MTB, MLE, mother tongue-based multi-language education, right? Nagagamit ka muna ng iyong sariling wika in the first 3 years and then in grade school. Bakit? Kasi nakita ng mga researchers, ng mga education experts na mas matututo ang bata kapag ginagamit yung kanyang first language in learning math, in learning the sciences. Hindi yung pinipilit natin ng English at the same time na natututo sila ng math and other subjects. Those are all reasonable, scientific, expert basis, reasonable, rational basis for these inclusions, these changes sa curriculum natin. Itong ROTC, wala siyang reasonable conclusion. Maliban lang dun sa, hindi kasi disiplinado mga bata ngayon eh. Hindi na kasi nila mahal ang bansa natin ngayon eh. Saan galing yun?
Yeah, yung ganun. Paano ba na-measure yun? Is there any way to actually quantifiably measure that? I mean, yung discipline o patriotism ng isang tao?
Of course, there are proper ways. There are good ways. There are proxy indicators that we can use. No, mahal mo ba yung bansa? We can administer surveys like that. Pero in a way, Christian, it's one of those social science. It's one of those questions na yung mga social scientists will find really suspicious. Bakit? Kasi bias ka na agad against the youth. Ina-assume mo na yung generation mo mahal nila yung bansa. Tapos yung mga kabataan, hindi nila mahal yung mga bansa. But if we would really be very honest about this, alam natin that pag kailangan natin ng volunteers, sino ang mga tumutulong? Mga kabataan. Pag kailangan natin sino yung mga active during the elections on both sides of the political spectrum? Mga kabataan din naman. Sino yung mga active na i-express yung kanilang mga opinions? Mga kabataan din naman. Pag tinanong din natin sa survey, makikita natin that actually Filipino youth still love this country. No, may mga pangarap na umalis ng bansa, pero they still want to serve this country. So across many indicators, kitang-kita natin that this is not a hopeless generation. This is not a hopeless population. We're not like a failed state na gusto na nating umalis ng bansang ito. So bakit pinipilit ang patriotism, nationalism, pagmamahal sa bayan through ROTC? When in fact, our young people love this country. And should we not foster their love for this country through different means? The arts, culture, education.
Hindi rin ba kaya yan? Consistent dun sa sign of the times na nakikita natin. Kasi nga, nakikita rin naman natin sa kasaysayan, no? Yung issues pag pinupush yung hindi kasi kayo disiplinado, you lack patriotism, pwede kasi siyang i-exploit or be taken advantage of by so-called nationalists. Tapos ang dulo po ng spectrum na yan, papuntang pasista na rin yan. No? Hindi ko po sinasabing pasista yung mga nagpo-push ng ROTC. Pero kung pinag-uusapan nga natin yung measure ng patriotism and supposed lack of discipline, pwede kasi siyang exploit, di ba? Tama po ba?
Exactly, Christian. I'm glad that you brought this up. Kaya nga, in many countries na nakaranas sa World War II and World War I, especially in Europe, takot sila dun sa salitang nationalism. And ako, having studied and lived and worked in Europe, aware talaga ako dito. Kasi tayong mga Pilipino, meron tayong sense na mahal natin ang bansa, mahal natin ang bayan. Ang tawag natin doon, nationalism, patriotism. Pag kinakanta natin ng lupang hinirang, tumatayo tayo, for example. And we respect, the national anthem. But when you use exactly those same word and express exactly the same idea to your European counterparts, makikita mo, may fear Bakit? Kasi galing sila dun sa karanasan na halimbawa, Deutschland, über alle. Right? The Germany above all. right?
Mm.
Nakakatakot yun kasi yung Germany above all, Deutschland über alle, ang experience nila doon ay sakupin mo yung mga hindi Germans, no? The
Mm.
Aryan race, no?
Yung
Um,
inferior race.
exactly. I'm sorry, the inferior. You're the superior race, you're
Ikaw
Aryan,
yung
and
Aryan. Mm.
ikaw yung Aryan, no? Sakupin mo yung inferior race. Hindi natin nare-realize na may ganong tendency yung political discourse natin dito sa Pilipinas kapag sinasabi natin, dapat ready tayo to protect this country, ready tayo to defend this country. We expect the youth to do that, pero hindi natin maasahan yung gobyerno to do that. Case in point, West Philippine Sea, Christian. Bakit parang hirap na hirap tayong ipaglaban yan? Pero kung i-expect natin ang mga kabataan na hindi sila disiplinado, dapat sila mabigyan ng military training to defend this country. Wait a minute. Aren't we passing so much burden on the youth to defend this country? That's another issue, by the way.
Okay. Pero hindi ba valid tong observation ni Lito Texon? Madalas ko rin madinig to, no? Yung sabi niya, mamomold ang patriotism kapag nag-train sa ROTC. Iba raw kasi yung disiplina sa military. Kumbaga may kakaibang tigas, routine, no? Kumbaga, hindi mo naman pwedeng i-dispute na talagang it can also teach discipline, no?
Fair enough. Sa experience ng mga bansa dito sa East Asia na merong formal military training for their men, Singapore, for example, and South Korea, alam natin na mataas, no? Mataas yung sense of national pride and ano ba? Yeah, for the lack of a better term, sense of national pride, no? Pero the question that I would like to pose back kay Sir Lito, no? At saka sa mga naniniwala sa military training na ano ba ang definition natin ng patriotism, number one? At yung definition ba yan ng patriotism, yan lang ba, military training lang ba? ROTC lang ba ang kaparaanan para ma-achieve ng mga kabataan natin yung patriotism na yun? We ask every young person around in this country, pag tinanong niya natin lang sila kung mahal ba nila ang bansa, most likely they would say yes. But pag tinanong mo sila, do you need to be trained in the ROTC para ma-develop itong patriotism na ito? Hindi. Kasi para sa kanila, yung pagmamahal nila sa bansa ay na-express in so many ways, no? Yung pagmamahal nila sa pamilya nila, yung pagmamahal nila sa community nila, yung pagmamahal nila sa school nila, yung pagmamahal nila sa neighborhood nila, and so forth. No? Kapag may mga catastrophe, sila yung nag-volunteer to help sa humanitarian crisis, for example. Filipinos love this country. Isn't that patriotism? That's patriotism. You don't need ROTC to achieve that. It's there.
Okay. May isang tanong sa'yo. Faculty mo to sa Ateneo. Ano? Sa siya? Ateneo School of Government. Ateneo Policy Center. Banggitin ko na, no? Si Attorney Michael Henry Yusinko.
Yes, I'm
tanong, hindi ko alam kanya magpabanggit, pero syempre, binanggit ko rin, no? Gaano ba kalaki o kalalim yung difference between the poor youth and middle class to rich young Filipinos in terms of discipline in school and engagements outside of school? Yan.
One more time, Christian. Gaano kalaki ang?
Gaano ba kalaki o kalalim yung pagkakaiba nung disiplina ng mga mahihirap na kabataan tsaka yung mga nasa middle class at mayayaman in terms of the kind of discipline that they exhibit sa school at saka yung pakikipagkapwa-tao nila sa labas ng eskwela?
I'm not sure if it has to do with class, to be honest, Attorney Mike, Christian. I don't know if it really has to do with class. Kasi sa tingin ko, it's really the kind of schools that you belong to, the kind of environment that you grew up in. Halimbawa, if you grew up in a school that exercises liberal arts thinking, no, debates, conversations, mahalaga sa'yo yung freedom of speech and freedom of the press. Maybe, Christian, mahalaga na sa atin, ikaw bilang professor yourself, no?
Expression.
Expression, yeah? Na para sa atin, the highest virtue that we have as Filipinos is yung ability na, actually, we can talk to one another, we can disagree with one another, at hayaan natin na yung ability natin to talk to one another can make us arrive at the best solutions for this country, no? Pag sinabi natin ganun, right? Pag ginamit natin yung freedom of the press as an avenue to arrive at your at what you think is the best for this country, it means that you grew up in an environment that values that. But other schools may teach you something else. The arts, for example, No, if you come from a more, artistic background or school, for example, tingnan din natin yon. Yung sinasabi natin na we want to build a historically conscious population generation, people who
Mm.
are aware of their history. Hindi ba kaakibat din yun sa patriotism, pagmamahal pa rin sa bayan yun? Right?
Mm.
But tingnan natin lahat yun, hindi batayan yung mamatay ako para sa bayan na ito as the only definition of patriotism. I think
Mm.
that's unfair. That's unfair.
Oo
If we
nga eh.
say that the only basis is to die for this country.
Baka
People,
naman
or,
kasi
sorry, Christian.
Hindi, baka naman kasi iba may hangover pa rin sa nagsabi before nung sa isang kampanya na pupunta siya sa disputed islands tapos magje-jet ski tapos itatanim yung watawat ng Pilipinas. Alam niyo po yung mga rhetoric po yun, no? Coming from
Oo.
demagogues. Kaya minsan, pag sinabi pong patriotism, hindi lang po yan yung mga nadidinig natin sa mga demagogues, no? Kasi mas
Exactly.
nakakatakot po yun.
Exactly. That's right wing. That's right
Mm.
wing. Talk is cheap, no? Kaya yung populism, maging maingat tayo doon sa emotions na dala nun sa atin na parang, yeah, tama yan, no? Pero
Yeah.
kung push comes to shove, wait a minute, sino ba talaga ang nagsasacrifice para sa bansang ito?
Correct. For example, ito, I'll cite a very concrete example. Ako, nasusundan ko kasi yung mga activities ni Professor Jail, no? He's very prolific as an academician, as a writer, as a public intellectual. Yung ginagawa niya, that's an expression of patriotism. Miski hindi niya sinasabi yan. Kasi kung mahal mo yung bansa mo, you would do your duty. Kung ano man yung naiatang sa'yo ng tadhana siguro o
Ako,
ginusto mo, no? So, sa
nako,
tingin ko, di ba dapat ganun yun? We can focus on people exercising their civic duty para
exactly.
hindi puro pagmamarcha lang.
Exactly. Alam mo, tama kang Christian. I mean, I have a long story to tell about this. I had a flourishing career as a scientist, as a social scientist in Europe. Diba? But I decided to come back eh. Pag tinanong mo talaga ako, bakit ako bumalik?
Bakit nga ba?
Kasi mahal ko talaga yung bansa. Kahit pa parang mas mababa yung sweldo ko dito, mas marami akong
Mm.
trabaho dito. Mas parang ang dami-daming challenges na nung bumalik ako dito.
Teka, na-curious ako. Para marami mo ko curious din dito. No? So, ano ba sana yung pupuntahan mo dati?
Oh
Nag-aaral ka
no,
kasi sa abroad eh, no?
yeah, I
And,
did my
and
PhD
you had
abroad.
opportunities there na after.
That's right. And I was already a postdoctoral fellow sa Max Planck Institute, which is one of the elite research institutes in Europe and in the world. And from there, meron akong potential career as a scholar in Europe. At ganoon naman talaga ang trajectory ng maraming mga Pilipino sa generation ko, no? Marami sa generation ko, konti lang sa amin yung bumalik talaga dito sa Pilipinas. But of course, I don't want to judge them kasi they had their
Oo.
own reasons also, no, for staying abroad.
Oo.
Pero sa akin, tama ka, Christian. Thanks for pointing that out. This is my expression of love for this country. Kahit paawayin ako ng mga trolls. Oops.
Totoo po yan. Hindi naman sa binobola ko yan sa jail, no? At maraming ganyan Pilipino, no? Hindi naman, maraming opportunities elsewhere, pero they decided to stick it out here. Because the battle is here. You love your country so much, kahit ang sakit-sakit na. Napapanood natin yan, di ba?
The
Gusto mo,
battle is
mahal mo yung bansa, pero yung mga politiko mo, may naisip
exactly.
akong word, pero masakit eh. Hindi ko na sasabihin. Okay.
And I really
So,
like the point you brought up. No, the battle is here, and this is not military warfare. The warfare that we are in right now is so multidimensional. Economic, education. Ako, sa akin, mahalaga yung education. With 9 out of 10 young people who are at 10 years old na hindi pa kaya magbasa properly, hindi ba warfare yon? Hindi ba it's a war worth fighting for or war worth waging?
Yun nga. Yung binanggit din ni Senator Gatchalian yung meron daw siyang kinommission na survey ng Pulse Asia. At
Yes.
lumabas ng 69% of the respondents agreed na kailangan ng mandatory ROTC sa senior high school. Ano ba yan? Is that even a good argument or basis to push for mandatory ROTC?
I have two answers to that question, Christian. Yung pagkaka-phrase kasi nung tanong ng Pulse Asia, in a way, loaded eh. Parang nakasabi doon ay parang ang ROTC ay isang programa para mahikayat yung nationalismo, patriotism, and so forth. No?
Okay.
So, kung ganyan ang framing ng question, talagang, ay oo naman, syempre gusto ko talaga yan. No? So in that sense, okay, no? Parang at least as it was defined in the survey, no? In the survey question. But on the other hand, yung tanong mo, is it now enough? Is it now sufficient to say, okay, therefore we should have our mandatory ROTC? The answer is no. Precisely because we go back to the very first question that we had at the start of our program. Ano ba ang basis ng pagsa-start ng ROTC na ito? What problem is it trying to solve? What issue is it trying to address? Or is it just one of those imaginary problems na nalikha ng mga taong mas gusto nilang bigyan ng pansin ng militarisasyon or securitization of our society than dun sa mga hardcore issues na pinagdadaanan ng mga kabataan natin ngayon. Quality of learning, access, those are very difficult issues. Mas madaling tingnan yung ROTC na lang kasi hindi disiplinado ang mga tao.
Ito, Professor, ibibida ko mas lalo ang mga atenista, mga Arneo. Okay?
Mag-lecture ka next week.
Ikaw? Ay, ako ba?
Ikaw.
Ako ba yun? Ay, ako pala yun, oo. Ako sa faculty. Hindi ko matanggihan si Professor Jail. Okay. Hindi, pero that's a very that's a privilege for me. Hindi, may madalas ako makausap din si Dean Ronald Mendoza. Isa po siya sa mga kino-quote sa mga stories, 'di ba, sa mga news reports.
Yeah.
And he is the outgoing, or baka natapos yung term niya, as Dean of the Ateneo School of Government. Dati pag kinakausap ko siya, why weren't you like the other political analysts na lahat pinapatulan, 'di ba? Lahat may comment, lahat sinasakyan, para mga garlic. Sahog, lagi nakasahog. Term ko po 'yan. Sabi niya, kasi gusto niya pa nagsalita siya, meron datos. Napag-aralan niya, may field work, 'di ba? Para hindi yung bato ka lang ng bato ng opinion. Naalala ko 'yan kasi nung binabanggit mo, Professor, yung ano ba yung basis for certain policymakers to push for certain policy changes, 'di ba? Example ito. Kaya nga lagi ko sinasabi sa mga nanonood, no, boto kayo ng boto dahil siguro pogi tsaka sikat, no, o kaya maganda o bagay na senador, no. Paano kung yan yung klase ng politiko na nagising isang araw, gusto ko talaga mag-ROTC kasi walang disiplina, 'di ba? Walang basis. O kaya gusto ko maglagay ng cable cars para ma-solve yung problema ng traffic sa Metro Manila. Ano ba yung datos? 'Di ba?
Exactly.
So, naalala ko lang siya dun sa punto na yan.
This is why academics like ourselves and journalists like yourself, Christian, we have to model the way. Hindi tayo pwedeng nagko-komento lang on anything and everything. Meron dapat, using the word discipline, dapat may disiplina tayo sa ganun. Napansin ko kasi minsan, di ba, yung punditry And I think we should, mema lang Maraming academics din na ganyan. But we should also expect more of that. No, I'm sorry, we should expect higher pagdating sa mga policy makers natin. Kasi kung akong academic, nagsalita lang ako, wala siguro itong impact sa lipunan natin. Pero yung isang policy maker, nagsabi siya, kasi hindi disiplinado ang mga tao, ang mga bata ngayon, gagawa na tayo ng ROTC, pumasa. It's an entire generation who will be affected by the whims of one person and everybody else. Kasi pero hindi reasonable. I think we can do better as a society if we ask tough questions, if we ask intelligent, critical questions. Not for ourselves, but for our children.
Yan, ang ganda na sinabi ni Professor Jail. Gusto ko pang pahabain ito ng 2 oras kaso alam ko meeting siya ng 8 o'clock. I want this to be disciplined at ipinangako sa kanya, papakawalan kita before 8. Ulitin na lang natin sa susunod. Ano pa to alam nating mas iingay pa yung mga nagpupush ng ROTC, no? At mamaya po, toward the end of this program, I'll say my piece about this proposal to make the ROTC program mandatory. In the meantime, maraming salamat sa iyo, Professor Jail Cornelio. Always a pleasure. Tuwan-tuwa yung mga nanonood sa atin. Ang galing-galing ng guest, no?
Wow. Yan. Hello po.
Yan si Alma Miranda, tuwan-tuwa. Isang katutak yung puso na pinakawalan nila. Ayan. Sige. Good evening. Maraming salamat sa iyo, Professor Jail. Okay? Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Kung nagustuhan niyo po itong video na to at naniniwala po kayo sa klase ng journalism na ginagawa po natin, pakishare na lang po itong video at please subscribe to my YouTube channel. You can also follow me in my different social media accounts. Pwede rin po kayo magpadala ng super thanks, super chat at saka po super stickers. Alam niyo po, malayo po yung mararating nito para po sa pagsuporta ninyo sa isang tunay na independent journalism. Maraming salamat po.